surah al-kahf, and we last time we left off at وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ ذُكِرَ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ. Am I right? Yeah. وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ ذُكِرَ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا وَنَسِيَ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ. So of course with the previous ayat we're actually talking about what's keeping people from believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the ayah before it was actually discussing about وَإِذْ قُلْنَا, the beginning of the story of the messages, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this world, beginning of the story of the malaika, the jinn, which is shaitan, iblis, refused to make sujood, move on, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting in the argument that they cannot be the ones to be the creators or even to get support from, because they did not precede the creation. We talked about that.
Yes.
In other words, they were creatures. If they're a creature and you're a creature, you both each have certain weaknesses that you are not al-aziz. You're not sufficient, and then you're going to need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that they were not there to witness the creation of the skies nor the earth, not even their own creation. In other words, they're just creatures as other people are creatures, and they are weak. وَمَا كُنْتُ مُتَّخِذَ الْمُضِلِّينَ عَضُدًا, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not going to take those that go away from the straight path as aduda, supporters, or even allies. And we talked about alliance, and we said that in Islam it's actually haram to take two types of alliances. One, alliance other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and alliance even in helping you do decision making from al-kuffar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually tells us that يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا عدوي وعدوكم أولياء. Don't take عدوي, my enemies, and your enemies as awliya. The word awliya would mean supporters, would mean the ones to guide you to the right path, because they come from a totally different epistemology. So you cannot use them as references to help guide you to the right path. And this is really important to mention, because
I think that was the main point.
That was the main point, and this still is always the main point, because when people don't realize and they're taking alliances, or they're taking even, let me say, definitions of principles and decisions from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or even those who feed or get their principle or get their guidance from other than Islam, then that would be misguidance. And this is something very common that happens with those that are doing right now marriage counseling, psychology, and all these different areas, not realizing that most of it is actually based on a culture that is, or theories that come outside of the Muslim principle.
And it's kufr.
And unfortunately, nobody's going to dare to say that, because right now, all these sciences, quote unquote, are actually presented as ilm. But unfortunately, if it's mixed with, let me say, ignorance and jahiliyyah, this actually becomes something that many of the students are not aware of. Where is the mixture of jahiliyyah and Islam? Because most of it is based on whether the studies, or whether the theories, or whether how you approach right and wrong, or your understanding of one, evil, theodicy, two, understanding of qadar, understanding of purpose in life, understanding of the meaning of life. All that is pretty much the triangle of how you deal with people with trauma, different psychological issues, and the list goes on and on. So same thing when we talk about marriage counseling. A lot of the marriage counseling is actually based on the relationship and understanding, defining what man and what woman what man, what woman is, how the relationship should be, the rights and the responsibilities. A lot of it is really based on whether it's a feminist approach, or whether it's a Western approach, to mean throughout all these different ages, a lot of these different approaches have actually come in because of different historical pressures, political pressures, different philosophies, which actually has a totally different core than a core of La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, or even the understanding of human, man, woman, that is based on Quran and Sunnah. And to see what I say based on Quran and Sunnah, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm talking here about laws and legislatures. But when I say about Quran and Sunnah, it's actually understanding and interpreting what is male and what is female based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given us in the general principles. What is happening right now is a lot of materialistic, to mean feminist approach, is pressuring even the Muslims into reinterpreting and redefining a lot of the different akhlaq, Islamic culture, Muslim culture, etc., redefining many things, and without them realizing they're actually taking from a principle of jahiliyyah. Yes, feminism is jahiliyyah.
But again, I have friends of mine who, when you talk about like self-care, and they would insist, repeat the word serenity again, it calms you down. But the truth is dhikr, and the dhikr of Allah does. Although the person is preaching gratitude and being positive minded, having like those good thoughts and all these things,
Fir'aun,
like meditation, like yes, it's meditation, but again, it's how it's put even to us as Muslims.
Fir'aun actually tells the people in Egypt, he was telling them, follow me because I fear that Musa might bring in destruction in the society. This is Fir'aun. Might bring in destruction in the society. In other words, even Fir'aun was promoting himself as the hero for the community and the person to bring about a civil society. Fir'aun, who was ordering for the killing of children every single year, promoting himself as people's rights, pro-civilians, and caring for the people. That's how Fir'aun was promoting himself as. And without us realizing, there are so many different deviant groups that actually promote themselves as such, as if they are actually bring about freedom, bring about a civilized civilized nation, etc., or bring about liberty and women's rights and human rights, and the list goes on and on. That's exactly what Fir'aun was promoting himself as. إني أخاف أن يبدل دينكم أو أن يظهر في الأرض الفساد. I fear, this is Fir'aun saying, I fear that he might change your religion, meaning the principles, the high principles that you stand on, that our country is based on. أو أن يظهر في الأرض الفساد, or he might bring about destruction in the society, i.e. terrorism. That's exactly how he was promoting himself as. And that's exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us, that the story of Jahiliyyah, that the story of Kufr, the story in how it was promoting itself, and how they were using these words to sell deviation, is the same. But we don't see the pattern because we live it. We live in those marketing style. We live it. We become consumers of that marketing without us realizing in how to look at it with a critical eye. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was revealing to us, be careful from this jahiliyyah, because it promotes itself in very sinister and very deviated ways where you may not realize all what it carries on the inside.
Like intermittent fasting.
Absolutely.
You can do sunnah Monday and Friday 2
Well,
days
there you
instead of
go.
intermittent fasting.
Absolutely.
It's like all
Without
the traditions in Islam.
people don't realize that the story is actually the same. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us, drawing us the patterns of how every single group, one group came about with, like, just like Prophet Lut came about with saying that this is to promote, that was to promote liberty and freedom. And then they just said, we don't have nothing to do with your daughters. In other words, we just want to live a different lifestyle. And then what did they say? Well, they said, أخرجوهم من قريتكم, get these people out, of an approach that is very similar to today, where no one is daring to say that type of sexual aberration is an aberration and not an orientation. You're prevented from that freedom of speech, and that's even what was happening during the time of Prophet Lut alayhi salam. So what did they say? Well, they said, أخرجوهم من قريتكم, just expel them out of the country. What was their sin? They're people that are seeking purification. What purification? Well, right now, even the word heterosexual is given a name like it's some kind of an old-fashioned way. And there's right now a newer way where people find it's just an orientation, it's just a different way of looking at things. So you have to be respectful, tolerant of people's different approach of things. The second you call it wrong, the second you say this, if it were to be applied on a global scale, even if it was something that people might have voted for, it is against humanity, it is against morality, it is against such and such, you will be approached in probably losing your job, or maybe even imprisoned. And who knows how far it's going to go. Now that's the same thing. Even with Prophet Lut, the story is the same. Expelled him and said that he has to leave because he was using a word where it was talking about morality and that people should return to principles and morality. And what was he approached with? Well, that he's seeking purification. Purification all of a sudden became disgusting. Man and woman marriage is very old-fashioned, disgusting. Accept different ways. And that's exactly the same story. Prophet Musa alayhi salam, when he was dealing with Fir'aun, it was the same style of, this man is going to bring about destruction. Same exact type of words without people realizing. You see, when people don't learn their tawheed, when people don't learn their Islam, when they're so used to drinking polluted water, they will see plain water as too plain and not something that is tasty. They won't even realize it, that their water was polluted. And that's the same thing. Our children, our youth right now going to the universities and getting degrees, we're so proud of them. Indeed, in many different fields. But unfortunately, what we don't realizing is that they're in many, especially in humanities, they're actually being fed jahiliyyah in the name of education. It is nothing but miseducation in the name of education. You might say, well, some of it is based on science. I won't disagree with that. But the biggest delusion that is mixed with some truth, it's the most dangerous poison is the poison that is mixed with honey. Because you won't realize, you will just think of it as sweet and you'll consume it thinking that it's yummy. You'll consume even more and more and more sugar, and you'll even eat more. And without you realizing, you're actually consuming the poison. That's the most dangerous poison.
Sugar.
And when we have our own children consuming that poison, there's actually an Italian proverb that says, the worst lies are the lies that are, every translator is a liar, and the worst of the lies are the lies that are mixed with truth. Because it becomes so hard for you to distinguish which piece of it is a lie and which piece of it is truth. It becomes so hard because you could see some truth, so your eye is focusing on the truth, and then you're becoming so, what is the word, but what is the word, you're not focusing on the truth, on the falsehood, but you're focusing on the truth, and you become so pacified from seeing that these faults, that these lies are enough to make that truth that is presented really appear in its real image, that it was not truth.
Can you know truth when you don't know falsehood?
Absolutely
you have
not.
to know falsehood.
You have to know falsehood to know what truth is. You have to know falsehood. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us. This is falsehood. Beware of this and beware of that, because without you realizing, you're going to sink in. You're going to sink in. And it's presented as education. Right now in schools, it's presented as education. In schools from early kindergarten to late PhDs, without them realizing. Yesterday, I was actually sitting with one of the students at St. Catherine, and she told me that her sister was studying religions, who's also Muslim. And what is the subject that she's doing a dissertation or something like that? What is the subject? How da'wah is used for political purposes. Unfortunately, you might think of it, how da'wah is used for political purposes. You might think of it, well, good. It seems very interesting, not realizing that the title of the dissertation is nothing but an intelligence to mean spying, and to mean a political title that is intended without the student. I know she means well, but she doesn't realize that she was made to think, to see whether da'wah is actually the Muslim method, and is starting to see that da'wah is nothing but a hypocritical, diplomatic, political way of presenting Islam. That was the details. Without her realizing, we're having our students now, a lot of these religious, Middle Eastern, Islamic studies departments, and the list goes on, are actually by 100% totally connected with what is called think tanks that promote and study Middle East, or study religious studies, etc., really for the sake of certain agendas. That's what I mean by political. It's an agenda. When our own Muslim students don't realize that they have become the dagger to stab the ummah in the heart in the name of ilm.
Because Islam is a way of life.
It's a way of
It
life.
determines
But to say,
everything.
oh, it's a political agenda. Are you becoming a part of the agenda yourself?
Your way of life.
Allah
cannot be
al-Musta'an.
political agenda.
It's Allah al-Musta'an. You know, right now we're getting even Muslim women right now promoting feminism and calling it, well, it's anyways Islam. Or even call it Islamic feminism. Totally got. You can't, because feminism has a totally different epistemology. It actually has a totally different plate that it feeds from. The plate that it feeds from is that equity, 100% equity. Man and woman are totally equal. And in fact, marriage is one institution that only has one purpose, which is to make women slaves for men. And that's why Simone de Beauvoir and all her likes were the ones to say and tell and totally and blatantly say that marriage is the first institution to enslave women. That's what feminism is. Without women realizing they're actually, you can't have somebody that feeds from that epistemology actually say, well, we can have a Muslim feminist. Islam feeds on La ilaha illallah, Quran and Sunnah.
And it has women's rights.
And
men's rights.
it has the definition. Even in Islam, there's no total equity. Because men are different and women are different. It has no total equity. It tells you each one has a different thing. It feeds on a totally different concept of justice.
Yes.
It has its own definition of justice. It has its own definition of right and wrong. When you actually say Muslim feminist, you're contradicting yourself. You're doing an oxymoron. Why is it an oxymoron? Because feminism regards that humans, women, people are the ones that define right and wrong. But as a Muslim, you don't say that it's humans. You say it's Quran and Sunnah. So to say Muslim feminist, you're actually contradicting yourself, because you're saying, I go back to equity, but the definition of equity, just say Islam. Definition of equity, definition of justice in Islam is totally different. Now, when we look at, why am I saying this? Is because when we talk about il-wala, the word il-wala, you cannot have wala unless you have bara. What is wala and bara? Bara is when you totally abandon kufr and all the philosophies that it has, and all the philosophies that it starts from, and all the philosophies that go into detail. In other words, al-usul wal-furu'. How did we come into having secularism? Well, it all started by considering that man is capable enough of making legislature. That's how we became into a secular idea. Now we go into voting, we go into all that lifestyle. Now that's the same thing. Without us realizing, we sometimes just live in a culture and consume the jahiliyyah without us realizing that this jahiliyyah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had told us before how people will live the jahiliyyah, consume it and become part of it. And many will be so proud that they're actually being activist Muslims, when in reality they're actually practicing the game and putting an Islamic foil on it, probably a foil by just like writing halal on pork. Doesn't go.
It's still pork.
You can't write halal and tell me ham. It doesn't work. Not because you put a label. That's al-wala wal-bara.
So basically, anything else other than the Quran and Sunnah, you have to really understand what's haram in it or kufr in it, based on the Islamic definition
Absolutely.
of haram and halal, before you can even try to mix anything.
You have to start with first getting the feed of pure and organic halal haram and pure and organic concepts of tawheed. If you don't have your tawheed, your understanding of Islam in place, you can't filter it. You're not going to be immune. You're just going to be kahatibi layl. You're just going to be blindfolded, taking from here, and you might be taking in the thorns without you realizing, or the poison without you realizing. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually tells us with that wala wal bara, you have to have al-wala by first feeding the right resources, and then you're able to distinguish this is right and this is wrong. Let's continue. وَيَوْمَ يَقُولُ نَادُوا شُرَكَائِيَ الَّذِينَ زَعَمْتُمْ. And on that day they will be told to call on those that they used to worship, they used to worship, and then we said that they would call them. وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا فِي هَذَا الْقُرْآنِ مِنْ كُلِّ لِلنَّاسِ مِنْ كُلِّ مَثَلٍ. وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا, because there was an argument. In the words before, that there was an argument. They rejected the argument because they regarded that they didn't have any evidence, or so they accused the mu'mineen. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ صَرَّفْنَا. صَرَّفْنَا meaning that there was an example after an example, after not only examples, but there were many patterns that were drawn in the Quran to help you see how things go, to help you distinguish right from wrong, to help you look at life and the process that deviation might go into, in whether it's going into a social deviation, economical deviation, philosophical deviation, social, the list goes on and on. All these deviations, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you an example of a social deviation or manner deviation of Qawm Lut, political deviation of Fir'aun, economical deviation of Prophet Shu'aib and his people, a philosophical deviation of Fir'aun, Qawm Lut, and also Shu'aib, and the list goes on because philosophy goes in all of it, and the list goes on, and even a religious deviation of the people of Quraysh, how they could go into all these different understanding without them realizing they're actually just plagiarizing and just going into the same cycle as before. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we had given the patterns in the Quran from every kind of an example, yet man, al-insan, أكثر شيء جدلا, is the most one to argue. Although shayateen are actually more arguable, in other words, they argue more, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned that they argued, that humans argue, and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about arguing here, it did actually mention that Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, that he also argued with the malaika and said, but, so when they said that we're actually going to the city of Qawm Lut, so he responded, but there's Lut in it. And they said, we know who's in it. نحن أعلم. We know even more who's in it. It's like, don't worry. Everything's under cover. Everything's under control, that is. Now, but not all arguing is necessarily negative.
Some of it is
Like, for example, the adab. All right? Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he argued, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the same ayah, he actually said that, and that Ibrahim alayhi salam, even after saying what his argument was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still praised him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called him awwahun halim. That despite that, not despite to mean in a negative way, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says it and presents Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam that even his argue contained in it wanting to bring in ilm, wanting to bring in good. So they said, but there's this. He was so concerned. But in the same thing with the malaika, they said, أَتَجْعَلُ فِيهَا مَن يُفْسِدُ فِيهَا, are you going to create who's going to bring about destruction? They argued with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But was that a negative argument? No. Because at the end, they said, وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ وَنُقَدِّسُ لَكَ. It's like, excuse us and pardon us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We worship you. So that part, it's not that we're arguing. وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ. We obey you in everything. But we're just inquiring. Not arguing, we're inquiring. Here's the difference between the word jadal and inquiry. Because the word jadal, to mean argue, as in this ayah, وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا, the word jadal is mainly used when the person is not arguing for the sake of seeking or acquiring knowledge, but they're arguing for the sake of wasting time, or to argue, not to argue as a place of in a way of ridicule.
To feed the egocentric mind, not for
absolutely
the truth, but to feed that egocentric
absolutely
mind that likes
and speaking
power.
about that egocentrism that arguing comes with, atheists tend to be the most ones to argue. Not that they necessarily have an argument themselves. They don't have an argument. They don't have answers to the questions that they put out or lay out. But it was only feeding one thing. It was just feeding their pride. And the method that is used, even in universities, I see that often, the method that is used is more to put down the person, or at least the deists, to mean the people that believe in God, to put them down in ways of ridicule. And the strange thing is, I see it as a psychological war at many times. A psychological war, especially from professors when they use it, and it is also feeding those that later adopt that new atheism style without them realizing. That method is used the sarcastic method is used in order to play a psychological war by putting others down, in order to feel that they have an argument, even though they don't necessarily answer the questions, but it's to feed their pride. And at many times they use very profane language. Profanity is always used.
But this happens in marriage too, where there's haqq and there's
well, you know, I'm maybe because I work at a university campus, I see it often, using profanity as a form of trying to look cool, trying to look somewhat of above others, somewhat smart, etc., without them realizing that it's more of a tactic. It doesn't necessarily prove that they have a point, but this psychological way of talking to the students, and many times the Muslim students, they would feel and lose their confidence. They would lose their confidence in front of the psychological battle, not because that these people have an argument, but many times it's really because of the psychological battle of trying to take away the confidence from the Muslims, so they will shy away from responding, refuting, arguing, proving wrong, and the list goes on and on. So the Muslims start becoming those, from a proud Muslim to a Muslim that loses their confidence, and they're little by little, their Islam is one piece after another, it's taken out. It began as a psychological war. And then they find themselves all of the sudden, well, I don't know what to say. What happened? It's not that there wasn't an answer in Islam. It's that they are in this university, they're only feeding on or being fed this jahiliyyah after jahiliyyah after jahiliyyah. And they would only go to the masjid, or even when they go to the class, it's probably once a month, or even if they go to a class, it's probably from somebody that just took some random classes at who knows from what institution. And most of these institutions are not actually qualified to the level of answering these questions. Most of them are actually at the level of ESL. Just like ESL, where teachers are, or let me say students might be taking English as a second language, it doesn't make them qualified enough to necessarily give a lecture or even be a teacher in English literature or even English language. And many of those teachers, unfortunately, were actually trained in institutions, probably Morocco, Syria, Egypt, etc. Most of it is actually at the level of ESL. Wallahi al-Azim. And they would be the ones to open these institutions to teach Islam, and they would be hidden under the name of ijaza in such and such, attended such and such, and most students don't realize that that institution only qualifies at the level of an ESL. It doesn't make the person qualified to actually teach Islam at the level. It's very sad. I'm so sorry if I'm disappointing and hurting many others in these words, but I think it's very important that we understand that it's not Islam that is weak to answer a lot of the questions that are posed out there. It's that many of the so-called qualified are presented as qualified, but this is diluting many. Because if somebody that is not qualified is presented as qualified, then the students are going to be deluded by thinking, well, I asked a qualified person, they didn't have an answer, therefore Islam doesn't have an answer. That's exactly what's happening.
I have a question, but aside from that, because we live in this world today, and what you're speaking about touches almost every aspect of life. It's just not the school, it's everything. It's once you learn even your Islam, and you know Islam says this about a stand, whether it's LGBT, and you know where you stand. A lot of the times there's a place where as Muslims we decide, okay, let me just keep quiet, this is not the right place to speak, maybe let me not take a stand. And like what actions we take is determined. So my question is it connected to what inside us truly we're trying to satisfy when we take? If I decide to take a stand because of the sake of Allah, I'm not going to benefit anything from this world. I have much more clarity and ability to speak whatever I want to say, even if it's what the Quran says, and period. But if my intentions are not connected straight to Allah, it's also with people and the benefits that I'm getting and the material, you know, the world's all connected to materialism, right? If I'm afraid, then even if I'm in school, yes, I know I'm a Muslim, yes, I know this is this, but I'm going to shy off and feel less strong to speak about it because I want this benefit.
Well, I'll only say one thing, Zamzam. A Muslim is always supposed to seek talab al-ilm. Okay. We have to revive.
That's the core of it.
That's the core of it.
Okay.
We have to revive seeking ilm, and that it has to be part of our life, no matter what. That as we go to seek degrees in order to get a job, the most important job that we are asked to fulfill and complete is the job that was handed to us, which is our own life. What were we created for? Worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So intention of what?
This is the most important thing. Guess what?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you one thing. Indeed, Islamic studies doesn't pay much.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't.
It pays nothing.
It pays nothing.
But it pays
you can have a PhD and it pays you nothing in Islamic studies, but here's one thing that pays off. Mm-hmm. If you do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, mm-hmm. you just need the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why if you want to study Islamic studies, if you're coming to study Islamic studies for the sake of money, sorry, you're coming to the wrong place. Islamic studies does not pay off.
In dunya.
It doesn't pay off. If you're coming for the sake of money, no. From the very beginning, you gotta know, have your intention and your sincerity for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only. Start from the very beginning. Don't await money. There's not much to wait for.
Accept it.
From the very beginning, do talab al-ilm for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and continue that path. When you start off with that, you have the sincerity that it's only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just keep going. Keep going. That's the most important thing. Dunya, the Prophet ﷺ actually said, whoever just invests in my sake, the dunya will come to him. Just do it for the sake of Allah. Dunya will come to you.
But that applies to us too, who are not
Every single
studying,
person. This
who are
is every
students,
single person. You see, Islamic education
And Islam.
is different than other types of education. Because in Islam, indeed, there are those that may have ijazas that indeed may be a lot more qualified than people with 3 and 4 and 5 PhDs in Islamic studies. It's a different type of ilm. I agree with that. But when it comes to seeking ilm, you want to remember that from the very beginning, just do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And ilm, subhanallah, you know, it opens up the door for you to know what's haqq and what's batil, because this dunya is just a passage. This dunya is just a passage. Seeking ilm is supposed to be every Muslim's duty. Every single Muslim, every single day. While you're going to your car, while you're driving, while you're going to school, every single day. You have to, right now it's so available. You have to acquire ilm every single day. Every single day. Because you're living this life for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you live this life as a test. I don't know how I got there. Sorry, you guys. I got it from the word jadala. That people are that people argue too much. And speaking of jadala, talab al-ilm does not come with the jadal. You don't acquire ilm by arguing. You don't acquire ilm by arguing. Scholars said that acquiring ilm starts with number 1. You start with first being silent. Just listen. Don't argue yet. Be silent. Just do that. Come and listen to the dars and just be silent in the beginning. And then the second part of it is, in the beginning you might not even remember everything that was said. You probably daydreamed 2/3 of the moment in the beginning. But then your heart will learn how to sit and focus. There's a samt and there's al-istima'. A samt comes with silence. You may not be focused on what is being said. The second part is al-istima'. Al-istima', you're sitting down and you're really listening with a tentative ear. You're focusing, you're understanding, you're processing all the information that is being said. This is al-istima'. The third one is memorization. Not memorization only in Quran, but memorizing the ilm, but taking the moment to memorize what is being said, to memorize those words, to memorize those texts. Why memorize? Because with memory, it starts with putting in ilm in a way for you to learn how to vocalize it. In a way to learn how to interpret, explain, how to understand, how to process those words. And that's why with hifd al-Quran is actually one of the most important start. You start with hifd al-Quran, you start with memorizing Quran. Because if you don't start with memorizing Quran, how much of Islam did you really learn? Then with hifd comes after that. Then you're starting to bring about those patterns and understanding different things. And then you start asking questions. The questions are filling up those gaps that you did not learn. Jadal is not inquiring, arguing. Arguing is not seeking. It's a very negative habit. Because it's not seeking knowledge as much as it is based on the center, you be in the center to find faults and put down others. Arguing and having an argumentative personality, with my experience, is one of the most distracting manners in marriage. it breaks down families. Especially if the wife is argumentative. Not the husband, especially if the wife is argumentative. Why not the husband? Am I here being misogynist? No. I'm not being a misogynist because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الرجال قوامون على النساء. It's not being a misogynist. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الرجال قوامون على النساء, meaning that the men are the ones to be in the leadership position, in the responsibility. But when the executive director is constantly debating every single move, sometimes it's positive negotiation.
Good fights.
Well, I wouldn't call it a good fight because that's an oxymoron, but I would say it's a positive critical eye to help make the best decisions. But if we're going to argue on every single thing and it has to be my way or the highway, that marriage is not going to last for long. Even if it does last for long, it's going to be hell. You can't assume that, oh, I have to be the person where, yes, I may believe something is right, but in the end, there has to be a final decision maker. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الرجال قوامون على النساء. There has to be a final decision maker. He'll be held accountable, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala held Adam more accountable than Eve.
So we have a pass actually.
Absolutely.
That's women.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala held accountable Adam more accountable than Eve. Even though he said both of them committed the sin. But at the end of the day, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you. The qawama is taklif, not tashrif. Qawama, it's a responsibility. It's not an honor. Taklif. It's a responsibility, not tashrif. Tashrif is an honor. It's taklif. When we look at that, and unfortunately, without us realizing, we are being fed al-jadal with feminism without us realizing, oh, you gotta stand your ground. You gotta just... We are asked to obey laws, and we're told if you obey laws, you're a good citizen. If you obey your teacher laws, you're a good student. But if you obey your husband, you're told that you're being oppressed.
But when you obey the husband is when you get more love and more compassion.
Absolutely.
And everything that you want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you the secret for true love is telling you, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this in them, so learn how to work al-qawama and learn how to not take away something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in him. Because if I take out something that is part of what you are and who you are, you're going to feel that your identity is being attacked. You're going to feel offended. And that was just to comment on the comment that the post that I put out there. And I said that was a sister that asked me if the husband, for example, says, he disagrees with the opinion of a woman reading Quran during her cycle, etc. I responded that it's not that husband and wife relationship is not who's right and who's wrong, because we live in a family. We live as a whole. It's not always trying to prove who's right and who's wrong. Sometimes we just have to go beyond in embracing one another, and sometimes we have to learn how to compromise. And sometimes we just have to learn how to, we speak of tolerance to other faiths, and right now we're speaking of tolerance towards LGBTQI and plus and who knows what.
We don't practice.
Yet when it comes to compromising and being tolerant to our husbands, we're being told that you're being oppressed and that no, it's your right to stand against it. Are we here consuming feminism and jahiliyyah and breaking our own households and breaking our own homes with it? Be careful.
But that's the interesting part. If you don't follow the truth, you just harm yourself. Whether it's the feminist,
without
and if you
you
die,
realizing,
it's waiting for you, and in dunya too, you're
without
tired.
you realizing, you'll be consuming those jahiliyyahs. You'll be consuming it and thinking of yourself as I'm being smart. Without you realizing, you'll consume it. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, الرجال قوامون على النساء. Here's a hint, ladies. You want your husband to love you? Well, make sure you don't take away that qawama from him. Because the second you try to take it out, that's when they become feeling offended, attacking. They would feel this way. So ladies, practice your other type of romance. Your obedience to your husband. Your obedience to your husband is going to bring in the romance.
And everything else.
Islam has a totally different definition of materialism. Materialism, part of it, is feeding our egocentric and feeding our own pride. This is materialism. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, wait a minute, be careful from being told that you're the center, even when it comes to arguing and having a dialogue. Be careful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you even those tools of how to have a happy marriage, happy relationship, and the list goes on and on. Islam has given you it, but you gotta look at it from the Quran and Sunnah. You gotta look at it through the lens, because if you're wearing the wrong glasses, they're gonna get murky, and you're not gonna see things right. They're gonna be blurry. They're gonna be blurry. You wear the wrong lenses, you will see things totally different, bigger than they are or smaller than they are, and you're gonna confuse things. وَمَا مَنَعَ النَّاسَ أَن يُؤْمِنُوا. What prevented people from faith? When إِذْ جَاءَهُمْ, when guidance came to them, وَيَسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّهُمْ, all they needed to do was seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, you practice guidance, you'll get there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ankabut that وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Just put an effort, those that put an effort, just a little effort in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُم. The letter La and the letter Noon that has a shadda, لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُم, in Arabic is actually meaning this is affirming something. That verily and surely we will guide them subulana, to our paths. But I thought there was only one path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's the path of guidance. But remember, subulana, there are different subul that all take to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dhikr is one sabil. Dhikr is one path. Sabil means path. Dhikr is one sabil. Following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's halal haram is one sabil, is one path. Having the right philosophy in understanding, distinguishing between right and wrong is one sabil. Wanting a halal job is another sabil. Wanting a halal marriage is another sabil. All those are subul. And meaning paths to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just make sure لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Just make sure that in every single path, in every single step that you, a decision that you make in life, will make sure that you're going into the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open it up for you. وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and whoever has taqwa, يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا, just when you felt that all the doors are closing at you, يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up an exit from where you least expected. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. What is يَرْزُقْهُ? يَرْزُقْهُ, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them rizq. Rizq, it could be marriage. It could be children. It could be wealth. It could be home. It could be so many different things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that the first secret to it is really seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Simple. When you think all the doors are closing at you, don't be too overwhelmed. And don't depend on people for your happiness, because they are as weak as you are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala يَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring you the rizq from where you least expect it. where you least expected it, it will come to you. وَيَسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّهُمْ. Huda, guidance, came to them. All they needed to do was seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's forgiveness. But here, رَبَّهُمْ, not Allah, but رَبَّهُمْ, their Lord. He's the one that's cherishing them. That's all they needed to do. إِلَّا أَن تَأْتِيهُمْ سُنَّةُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. Yet, the same pattern, sunnah is pattern, the same pattern that those that before them had done is the same exact thing that they also fell in. What is that pattern? Pride, which is egocentric, and 2, pleasure, and 3, wanting to focus on their benefits and pleasures in dunya and did not want to think of the akhirah. Those are sunnatul awwaleen. The nations before them, they did the same thing. قصة بن ساعد الإيادي. قصة بن ساعد الإيادي was one of the Ahnaf. Ahnaf means those that came before the Prophet ﷺ or during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, but they did not believe in idolatry. There were only about 4 of them in Mecca. Qissa ibn Sa'ad al-Iyadi happened to be one of them. Qissa ibn Sa'ad al-Iyadi, he didn't necessarily find guidance, but he was able to see through the pattern and look at the pattern and just ask questions of any random person that is supposed to ask. So he says, أيها الناس اسمعوا وعوا إنه من عاش مات ومن مات فات. O people, listen and comprehend. You can listen and you cannot think about it. It can pass. Listen and comprehend. إنه من عاش مات. Whoever is alive will die, and whoever is dead is gone. ومن مات فات. But since there's a pattern of life and death, life and death, وكل ما هو آت آت, there's going to be more coming. For sure, life is not life and death, life and death, life and death. There's something else. There's a pattern, more life coming, and what comes after that. Now, he says, well, let's look into another pattern. ليل داج ونهار ساج وسماء ذات أبراج ونجوم تزهر وبحار تزخر وجبال مرساة وأرض مدحاة. He says, ليل داج, we can see the dark night. Right after it comes a bright daylight. We could see a pattern. Looking at the pattern in the world around us, in the cycle around us, we could see Laylun Daj, dark night coming after it, bright daylight. وَسَمَاءٌ ذَاتُ أَبْرَاجٍ, and we could see in those skies, we could see in those patterns in the skies, we could see that in such and such year it comes back, and we could see that there is a cycle that the world goes into, and that's where we see the zodiac things, we see the patterns. وَنُجُومٌ تُزْهِرُ وَبِحَارٌ تَزْخَرُ, and we could see in those oceans and those seas wave after wave, wave after wave. It's telling us that life, there's a pattern. It doesn't stay still. أرض مدحاة جبال مرساة. We could see high mountains and low earth. These patterns all around us is telling us that there is a pattern in a cycle of life, and that there is something behind this pattern giving us a hint. وجبال مرسى وأرض مدحى. And then he says, يا معشر إياد, O tribe of Iyad, أين الآباء والأجداد? Where are our fathers, our grandfathers? أين الفراعنة الشداد? Where are the pharaohs that were mighty and strong? أين الفراعنة الشداد? Where? And then he says a poem. He says في الذاهبين الأولين من القرون لنا بصائر لما رأيت مواردا للموت ليس لها مصادر تمضي الأكابر والأصاغر. He said all we could see في الذاهبين الأولين, from those that left before us. في الذاهبين الأولين لنا بصائر, from those that have gone already, the previous nations, we could see some insight. لما رأيت مواردا للموت ليس لها مصادر. When I saw that death is coming from no source, young and old, gone. تمضي الأكابر والأصاغر. Young and old go. What happened? He says, أرضوا بالمقام فأقاموا أم تركوا هناك فناموا. Did they just like death and decided to stay and not come back? Or were they forced to stay somewhere? This is قصة ابن سعد الإيادي. Just looking at the patterns, that there's more meaning to life than eating, drinking, reproduction, sleeping, getting a job, getting money, getting married, and waking up, and etc. There's more to life. This is قصة ابن سعد الإيادي. سنة الأولين. No, it was actually an oration that Qasr ibn Sa'd al-Iyadi had delivered. I just happened to memorize it. سنة الأولين أو يأتيهم العذاب قبلا. Are they going to live, or these people, they practice the same pattern as those that have gone before them? سنة الأولين, the pattern of those that came before them, lived life, died, and so the pages flipped on them, and other nations come, and the pattern continues. أو يأتيهم العذاب قبلا, or when العذاب, punishment, comes to them. What punishment? There's a punishment in the akhirah, and there's a punishment in the dunya. If you live, where did I get this from? What's the evidence? The evidence is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكَ. Whoever stays away from the remembrance or from the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they will have a life of dhanka. A life of dhanka, meaning a life of dhanka. They're going, hitting one end to another, life of sorrow, life of sadness. They don't know what to do because they don't know how to narrow down their choices into halal choices. So what do they go? Then they live a life of dhanka. Ma'ishatan. Ma'ishatan dhanka is actually in this life. Then this is adhab. You go away from the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You decide to take the path of, whether it's drinking, zina, the list goes on, and you decide to go into haram things, you're going to live a life of dhanka. It's not going to bring you any happiness. And on Judgment Day, وَنَحْشُرُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَعْمَى, and on Judgment Day, they will be resurrected blind. And they will say, قَالَ رَبِّ لِمَ حَشَرْتَنِي أَعْمَى. They will say, Ya Allah, why did you resurrect me blind when I was able to see? before. He said, that's because you got the revelation, but you didn't see it. You decided to turn a blind eye on it. You decided to pretend that you're forgetting about it. You decided to walk away from it. Now, it's blind. It's a blindness. It's blindness as a result for the sin that you had committed. You forgot those. You turned away from them. Now it's that path. أو يأتيهم العذاب قبلا or قبلا. قبلا or قبلا is actually two different قراءات. أو يأتيهم العذاب قبلا, meaning they may, some of them, alright, يأتيهم العذاب قبلا, that it's too late for them. It's either too late because the punishment came to them in this life or in the akhirah. It's too late for them to come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because the punishment came to them. They decided to live the life of the previous nations just based on pleasure and all that, and they don't realize there's more to life than that. وَمَا نُرْسِلُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِلَّا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ. Because all we send the prophets and the prophets and the messengers is really to do one thing, to bring you glad tidings or to warn you. مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ. In other words, the duty for the prophets and messengers is just to give you a warning or glad tidings. Their duty is وَمَا عَلَى الرَّسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغِ. Their duty is just to deliver the message. They can't force you, but that's your job to do. وَيُجَادِلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِالْبَاطِلِ. Now here's the word جدل again. This word جدل, and there's يجادل, which is الفعل المضارع. يجادل, meaning they're constantly. يجادل الذين كفروا, they're arguing. The الذين كفروا, those that deny the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are arguing. يجادل الذين, they're constantly arguing. What are they arguing? They're arguing بالباطل. They're arguing with misguidance. ليدحضوا به الحق. ليدحضوا به الحق. ليدحضوا means الانزلاق, meaning that they're trying to find any gap in the argument that you might present, just in order to say, see, I proved you're wrong. Trying to find any gap. Not necessarily looking at the big picture, but they're trying to find any gap. Many times, Allah better feel, some people actually send me. I may write a post on Facebook or anywhere. And some people, they're not necessarily looking for what is written, but they're trying to say, oh, look, didn't capitalize that letter. Oh, look, that was a misspell. Oh, look. It's like, I'm a mother. Sometimes I just write it when I'm probably standing cooking something, and the idea came to me and I just wrote it really fast, and my autistic son is probably following me trying to do something, so I didn't have the time to change it. But some people, they will just want to prove you wrong, just even if it meant, oh, forgot to capitalize a noun, or forgot to capitalize a name, or put the comma in the wrong place. That proves that that person is wrong. لِيُضْحِضُوا بِهِ الْحَقَّ. Just trying to find any gap, just to prove that the person, even if they've got haqq, that these people are not qualified to say what's haqq. These people they actually have something wrong, etc. Just to find the same thing with the prophets and the messengers. So what did they accuse, for example, of Prophet Musa alayhi salam? He says, أَوَلَمْ نُرَبِّكَ فِينَا وَلِيدًا. Fir'aun says, hey, listen. Fir'aun telling Prophet Musa. He says, didn't we, that is Fir'aun, he's like, I thought I was the one that actually adopted and took care of you as a young child. That's Fir'aun. So Prophet Musa responds, oh, that's because, is in Surah Al-Shu'ara, well, that's because you're the one that oppressed the Bani Israel, where my mother had to actually find a way to keep me hidden so you won't slaughter me. It's like, تلك نعمة تمنها علي أن عبدت بني إسرائيل. You're here bragging that, oh, I adopted and took care of you, so how dare you go against my kingdom? That's what Fir'aun was saying. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Prophet Musa alayhi salam was telling him, well, wait a minute, you got the whole wrong picture, the whole argument wrong. The reason why I ended up in your castle was really because you were oppressing Bani Israel. You're here bragging that you took care of me. You forgot that you were actually enslaving Bani Israel and killing their children. Same thing here. لِيُضَحِدُوا بِهِ الْحَقِّ, trying to find any gap. And something very important here. Always, when you want to give da'wah, not always do you get yourself indulged and go deep in giving da'wah when other people are just not ready to listen. What does that mean? 2 ayat I need to say. 1, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا يَسْتَخِفَّنَّكَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُوقِنُونَ. What does that mean? وَلَا يَسْتَخِفَّنَّكَ, don't let those that don't have don't have serenity or even sincerity or even faith in their hearts, لا يستخفونك, don't let them dishonor you. Don't let them dishonor you. When you represent Islam, when you are standing here as represent Islam and as a person to represent Islam, don't put yourself and say, well, I'm here doing da'wah, and be in place of mockery or be in place of making a clown of yourself just to give da'wah. No, you stand with all the full pride when you talk about Islam. With full pride, with confidence. You don't allow anybody to put you down. Not because of your egocentric, no.
Because of the message.
Because of the message that you're giving. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, when that Sahabi was doing that the tawaf, during that time, and was doing it with a proud gait or with a proud stand, the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in places like this, because of place of jihad, because they're doing tawaf, because the enemies are trying to lurk them, because they're trying to put them down, the Prophet ﷺ said, that gait, meaning that walk, Allah and His Messenger love. Why? Because it's showing confidence, because it's trying to reveal the confidence of a Muslim. وَلَا يَسْتَخِفَّنَّكَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُوقِنُونَ. Don't let those that don't have respect for Islam put you in a place of mockery. You gotta have pride. Stand strong. Don't confuse things when you want to give da'wah and think that you gotta be a mop where people start wiping their feet on you, or throwing those dirty words at you. No, you gotta be strong. This is really important. Be strong. Not in the name of da'wah that you become people's target, and especially those people that didn't really learn how to discipline themselves.
Or afraid to discipline.
Absolutely. I used to get many phone calls of people that don't know how to don't know how to ask simple questions respectfully. In every single sentence, they would have a letter in it, meaning profanity. That's not how you speak to a doctor in a clinic. Why did you think it was okay to speak with me that way? You gotta respect. You have to have respect. Don't put yourself in place of mockery. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in surah al-A'la, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَذَكِّرْ إِن نَفَعَتِ الذِّكْرَ. And remind if reminding them works. If it works. But don't put yourself in place of mockery.
If it doesn't,
don't put yourself in place of mockery. Some people تأخذهم العزة بالإثم. Some people أخذته العزة بالإثم. Some people with their sin, with their deviant lifestyle, they will actually be proud of it. And they'll talk about it with pride. They'll talk about their deviant lifestyle with pride. And so happy about it. Nothing to be happy about. You got to show that. You got to be proud as a Muslim. What I mean by proud with your Islam, not proud with your egocentric part. وَاتَّخَذُوا آيَاتِي وَمَا أُنذِرُوا هُزُوًا. And they would take the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, اتَّخَذُوا آيَاتِي. In other words, they weren't necessarily keen about finding truth because they're just roaming around their own egocentric part. And they take the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all that they were warned as huzwa. They're just taking it in place of mockery. And that is feeding their pride and their egocentricity in order to make themselves feel like they've got a point.
How is sincerity connected to that? Because every time I try to say I seek the truth, and I'm truly not sincere. The truth is very bitter a lot of the times, because it means I have to change a lot of my whole life, and it starts a lot of war within. And a lot of the times, even me not trying to go against it, unless I'm truthfully sincere to seek that truth, I easily go to the place of mockery and all this stuff. If my intention was not, if I wasn't ready to know the truth and accept it or start working in it. Sometimes it's so powerful to know it, especially if you live a deviated lifestyle.
Well, with طلب العلم ضاع العلم بين اثنين الكبر والحياء. Ilm gets lost between two things. كبر, pride, والحياء, being shy, in the wrong place. Kibr, pride, when you know that somebody might have more ilm than you, but you've got all that pride that who am I to learn from her? And I find that more in women than men, by the way.
Yeah.
I find that more in women than men, where, and it's really strange how women are always speaking of misogyny, yet they're the most misogynist. Well, no, seriously.
Yeah.
By the way, same thing with, even when we talk about, what's her name? Simone de Beauvoir. She's actually the most misogynist person, yet she's actually considered the godfather of feminism. The most misogynist. Anyhow, unfortunately, it's very common that, yeah, we tend to get our social lifestyle in the way from talab al-ilm. So, yeah, how come, and this is from within side of, hearing and overhearing the women's conversations. If it's a man talking and giving a khutbah and talking, let's say, about women or men, it's usually, yeah, well, anyways, he's a man, he's being misogynist. If it's a woman, yeah, she's trying to just stand against women. If it's a woman, well, anyways, I don't trust women's ilm. This is so common. And if it's and unfortunately, women are actually right now finding so many arguments to stay away from talab al-ilm. Well, how come there aren't any female scholars? If you have a male scholar, go ahead, seek talab al-ilm. It's just for the sake of argument, not necessarily really for talab al-ilm. Not for talab al-ilm.
But we practice this.
How come the masjid doesn't have a place for women? If there's a place for women, they don't even show up. No, I've seen it. Mm-hmm. If you would have a place for women, they don't show up. It's just trying to argue, not necessarily wanting haqq.
But inside us, Habibti, do we have, I'm not even talking, I always like to just talk about myself first. Like my sister, if she gives me a truth, and if my sister-in-law gives me the same truth, although I will connect that it's true, I have to, before I take it from my sister-in-law, I have to box her first, put her in a place where I feel like I'm still in control, and then come and say, okay, she was saying the truth. I have a bias. These are the things I'm studying inside me.
Well, you don't have to tell me all your sins, girl. Just keep it quiet.
I'm just saying, like,
keep it silent.
This is the stuff, for now, it doesn't affect me. But I had to accept that I'm biased inside me. Why did I feel like this towards her? And I felt different towards her. Then I had to deal with my nafs. And then now I take her advice way much more humble, whether she's right or not, more than my sister, because I have to work on myself.
We always have to work on ourselves.
But then that's the thing. If the truth humbles you, and you always, if you're truly sincere and you need that change, you really have to put a camera on your heart and take yourself out of the picture as you learn and see how you react to these things, and then find the right thing that you're supposed to do.
What I find, if we actually get ourselves busy with the right things, there wouldn't be all these arguments around us.
Correct.
Wallahi.
Yeah.
If, get yourself busy with the right things, and that's why part of the tazkiyah is that you would abstain from qeel and qal, from using the word she said and he said, or said, or abstain from that word. It saves you a lot. It saves you a lot, and then you will have time for talab al-ilm, and you will have time for tazkiyah, and you will have time for
exactly
dhikr.
By that?
Well, stay away from she said, I said, they said, etc. Stay away from that word, and without you realizing, because you will stay away from the word said, you will find yourself more, because you can't talk about what was being said in all those dialogues. Don't talk about that. You will find yourself having more free time
to focus on
dhikr, to focus on dhikr, to focus on talab al-ilm, to focus on that. When people send me trying to argue, let's sit and let's argue and let's do this and I'm going to prove you wrong, on that moment, this is a block right away. This is a block instantly. That's it. Okay, I know how to do it. Block. Because you are not there, and I don't have the time, because once the person is there to fight, let them calm down. Shafi'i used to say, no, Shafi'i said, إذا سبني نذل تزايدت رفعة وما العيب إلا أن أكون مساببه. He said, إذا سبني نذل, if a low person swears at me, تزايدت رفعة, it's not that it makes me low. No, they made themselves low. I became in a higher rank. وما العيب إلا أن أكون مساببه, because the true immorality is that if I were the one that was going to respond in that low language. يزيد سفاهة فأزيد حلما. He increases in his lowness and the low language that he's using. يزيد سفاهة فأزيد حلما, and I will increase in my forbearing morality. كعود زاده الإحراق طيبا. كعود, just like an incense. Just like an incense, when you burn it, it makes more and better smell. Just let them burn themselves. Don't respond to it. When they go low, you don't go that level. Just like Michelle Obama. They go low, we go high. Don't go that level. That's Shafi. I said it way longer, way earlier than her. Well, that's the same thing. Go to that level where you go up in your morality.
Be the bigger person.
What was that?
Be the bigger person.
Of course, be the bigger person. When somebody's like, they're willing to, that's a block right there. Just block. Yeah. Simple. So these people are not ready to. These people are. It's not a dialogue. It's these people are ready to attack.
Would you say that
when you're actually attacking and you get into that argument of attacking, you're going to get into defensive and then offensive mode, and then what ends up in that is something nothing called defensive and offensive. Defensive and offensive is it's a fight. Yeah. She knows it. She's a boxer. She knows it. It becomes a fight. Right? What is that? It's a fight.
And it's something very crazy.
Absolutely. وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ. There's no وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ. And there's no one more oppressive from those that were reminded, ذُكِّرَ, reminded with the words or with the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the verses of their Lord, actually, بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ, the verses of their Lord. فَأَعْرَضَ. Fa means right away. أَعْرَضَ means they turned their backs on it, and they would forget what their hands had committed. This is a metaphor. It's not literally what their hands committed, but it means what they have committed in action. إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً. This is very important. If you look at right here, it says what they have committed, and then it says إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً, meaning what they have committed has a direct relationship between how their hearts realize, absorb, and how their ability to comprehend and ponder in the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all based and determined based on what they have done. What determines their ability to understand and comprehend is none other but what they have committed. You bring in a certain lifestyle, that lifestyle is capable of determining and framing and shaping how your heart is going to embrace haqq or batil. What you do, your daily lifestyle. Are you constantly just watching movies, listening to music, hanging out with these cool dudes? Is that the lifestyle that you're living in? Well, if that's the lifestyle, that lifestyle is going to determine how and what decisions and what path you take right after. Are your friends people of dhikr, or your friends people of hangout? If your friends are people of hangout, your future is going to be based on hangout and pleasure. But if your heart is connected with dhikr, then you're going to be connected with the dhikr. You determine. You want that changed? Well, you change by changing the environment that you're in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change until they change with what was within themselves. What changes within yourself? It's basically your action. What are you exposing yourself to? فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا. إِنَّا جَعَلْنَا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً. Because of what they have committed, their hearts have now been sealed. Akinna, their hearts are now sealed from understanding, and even their ears have been locked, have been blocked and locked. What happened? So what they did made a barrier that sealed their hearts, just like Iran, and now they can't understand it right. They're so focused. How is it that they don't understand it? Their focus becomes in the wrong area. You could discuss this matter and they're looking somewhere else. You could tell them about the akhirah and their focus is in the wrong place. You could talk about akhirah, but their focus is so much in pleasure that you can talk about the akhirah. They will repeat the words that you're saying, but their focus is not there.
But this is connected to how you explain it. You know, human, starting from the point of free will, the actions you take every little day determines how open your ears and your hearts are. If you take the wrong side, like you drew the tree, if you go that way, the more you go, your heart and your ears are still getting closed. Whatever, even if they tell you anything, you won't even see, because it's not your focus, it's not anything that you're looking at.
It's just like, for example, somebody could be holding their phone on in the corner, and they could be scrolling who knows what. They're there.
But they're not there.
But they're not focused on what we're saying. Did they really attend the halaqah? No. Because they might be there, what their focus is on is really their phone. All they are hearing us doing is nothing but blur.
Even
It's
salah.
It's just a sound in the background that your mind is not focused on. Your mind is not focused on. Same thing. When it comes to فَأَعْرَضَ عَنْهَا وَنَسِيَ مَا قَدَّمَتْ يَدَاهُ, they're not even hearing you, because their focus is mainly on that pleasure.
Or if they do.
And
they
their
just-
adhanihim waqara, they're blocked.
Yeah, and they like feel like they don't want to change their ways. And
No.
like they feel like offensive. Like
Yeah,
oh,
absolutely.
why
وَإِن تَدْعُهُمْ إِلَى الْهُدَى, here it is. And if you call them for guidance, وَإِن تَدْعُهُمْ meaning you do da'wah, إِلَى الْهُدَى, to guidance, فَلَن يَهْتَدُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا, then they will never, فَلَن يَهْتَدُوا إِذًا أَبَدًا. At فَلَن يَهْتَدُوا is enough to actually say they won't find guidance. But the ayah confirmed and said إِذًا أَبَدًا. And even if they were to live forever, they will never be guided. So this ayah is confirming that no, it's not only that they'll never find guidance. وَرَبُّكَ الْغَفُورُ ذَا الرَّحْمَةِ, yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, but still, your Lord is most forgiving. And Dhur Rahmah. Why not the Rahim? Because Dhu and Tha and Thee actually means to contain. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and your Lord is Al-Ghafur Al-Rahim, really. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying Al-Ghafur, and in another way telling you, and also the one that contained all mercy. لو يؤاخذهم, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was going to hold them accountable for every single second, لعجل لهم العذاب, he would have then anticipated, لعجل لهم العذاب, he would then have anticipated the punishment. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so merciful that He's giving them the time to choose, the free will, the opportunity, giving them different signs. Yeah, your car, you got in a car accident. Here's opportunity number 1. Your child got cancer. Here's opportunity number 3. Number 2, you also got some kind of an illness. Opportunity number 4. We get opportunities to make dua every single season. We get into a flu, right?
Yeah.
You get thirsty, don't you? You need to use the bathroom. You need this. You need that. All these different things are just a reminder of your weakness. لَعَجَّلَ لَهُمُ الْعَذَابِ, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy is letting them. They're living in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy and giving them time. بَلْ لَهُمْ مَوْعِدٌ لَن يَجِدُوا مِن دُونِهِ مَوْئِلًا. But in fact, they have an appointed day. They will not find anywhere to go and hide from it. وَتِلْكَ الْقُرَى, and وَتِلْكَ الْقُرَى, meaning those cities or that city, أَهْلَكْنَاهُمْ. And another example, another pattern, they were destructed when they have exceeded their limit. And we made لِمَهْلِكِهِمْ, meaning for their destruction, an appointed day. Just see an example. وَسَلَمْ عَلَيْهِ سَيدنا Muhammad. We'll come back next week. We got to pick up our kids, inshallah. And next week we'll continue the story of Prophet Musa. Really exciting.
next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, inshallah. Inshallah. وصلى على سيدنا محمد. And جزاكم الله خيرا. Tonight, see you at fiqh.